Yeah, and he was a very interesting guy. I met him again when I visited in 2020. It was sort of heartbreaking, really, to think of all of the things in my life that had changed in those 10 years, and then to see him again and to realize how little for him had moved on.
Do you ever believe that someone has been wrongly convicted or framed, or maybe you might look at the facts and say, well, there's not a lot of evidence here. How could this person get convicted? What's their story, everybody? Pete here from Thairish Times. Hope you're doing well. So today I'm interviewing Matthew, who works for a charity called Prisoners Abroad, and they're based in the UK. And what they do is they provide support to British citizens that find themselves locked up abroad. Now, in this video, we're going to focus more on British citizens that are locked up in Thailand. We're going to talk about the types of crimes, the most common crimes that British citizens get imprisoned for in Thailand. We're also going to talk about the conditions in Thai prisons, which wear prisoners down mentally and physically. And then we're going to talk about the work prisoners abroad do to support British citizens in Thailand. So quite a hard-hitting interview, this one. I hope you enjoy it, folks. Let's get straight into it. So Matthew, thanks for coming on here today. I'm excited to hear your story. Can you just explain a little bit about what you do, Prisoners Abroad? What is it that you do?
So, Prisoners Abroad is a welfare-based charity. We focus on trying to protect the welfare of British citizens when they find themselves in detention. So that means protecting their mental health, protecting their physical health, that kind of thing. So, yeah, we're not a legal organization. We don't try and get people out of prison. What we essentially do is try and protect the welfare of people when they are in that situation, and give them some sort of hope for the future.
Okay. So this channel is called Thairish Times. So there's always been a focus on Thailand and Southeast Asia. Are there many British people in prison in Thailand?
Yeah, I mean, Thailand traditionally has been a country where quite a substantial number of Brits are in prison. That has changed over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, when the pandemic hit and things like that, that really kind of reduced numbers quite significantly. But yeah, certainly in terms of Southeast Asia, Thailand has always been a very popular destination. A lot of Brits go there. A lot of Brits go there on holiday, but also Brits go there to live. So we get a whole range of offences committed, varying from those kind of things that, stupid things that people do when they're on holiday and in high spirits, but also, people actually living in country.
And would the main type of crime that you see people get sentenced imprisoned for, would it be drugs related?
I'd say that that'd probably be about 40% of it, something like that. Yeah. The other sort of crimes that are quite common, sexual related offences are fairly common. And we have a lot of visa overstayers. That's a significant kind of proportion of the people who are arrested in Thailand.
Do you ever, I know it's a hard question to answer, but do you ever believe that someone has been wrongly convicted or framed, or maybe you might look at the facts and say, well, there's not a lot of evidence here. How could this person get convicted?
Yes, it does happen. And I've even had some very interesting conversations with prisoners that I have visited in Thailand. Very fortunately for me, guilty or innocence doesn't come into the decisions that I need to make, which is great, because if I found myself in a situation of having to sort of discriminate based on what I think the person did or didn't do, then it would make my job an absolute nightmare. But certainly I've spoken to people who have found themselves detained and facing long periods of time in prison, claim that they didn't do it, and I believe them. Yeah, it certainly happens. There was one particular man that I visited in Thailand in 2010, and he was serving a sort of 30, 40-year sentence for something that he claimed he didn't do. He was one of the nicest individuals that you could come across. I mean, consular staff told me that he was always so polite. He had medical training, so he was helping out other prisoners inside the prison. Just a really sort of generous spirited man. And I was quite impressed because he was saying that the food was so poor that he didn't eat it. But what he did do, he used the food that was provided to him to cultivate maggots. So he would let the flies land on the food, lay their eggs, and then when the maggots hatched, he would use those maggots as his source of protein, not the food.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, and he was a very interesting guy. I met him again when I visited in 2020, and it was sort of heartbreaking really to think of all of the things in my life that had changed in those 10 years, and then to see him again and to realize how little for him had moved on. But very glad to say he's now out, so that's a chapter closed. But yeah, at Prisoners Abroad, we are lucky not to have to get into the ins and outs of whether somebody's guilty or innocent, because it's just about their individual situations and how we can support them.
How do the conditions of the prisons in the UK compare to the prisons in Thailand?
Things are a lot simpler in Thailand. I think one of the things that family members will often sort of comment to us with a great deal of surprise and shock is that when people find themselves in prison in Thailand, then they don't have a bed to sleep on, that they don't even have necessarily a mattress to sleep on. So I think people find that quite shocking. Obviously, Thailand's a very different country, and the Thai people have a different way of doing things. So it's not so shocking when you realize that a lot of Thai people would, sleep on the floor, roll their mat up in the morning, and use that space for other things. So obviously, there's quite a culture shock in that regard. So yeah, the cells tend to be quite big open spaces. There's a lot of people in the cell. You can find yourself, it could be up to 100 or other people. Perhaps there might only be 2 toilets for all of those people to use. As I said, no beds or mattresses, so people will be sleeping on the floor, in very close quarters, sort of side by side. People sort of like sardines, I suppose. People literally lying next to each other, touching. So I think it's a problem if you wake up in the middle of the night and you go to the toilet. It may well be that when you come back from the toilet, the space that you were sleeping in has now disappeared, that kind of thing. So that's a very different thing in terms of conditions. I think most Thai prisons work on a system where people are in their cells from about 4 p.m. till 6 a.m. But from 6 a.m. until 4 p.m., you're out of the cell. You can wander around. You've got quite good freedom of movement. You can associate with different people, different parts of the prison, and so on. So that's a bit different as well. I mean, one of the common complaints that we hear from people who come back into the UK prison system is that although it's nice to have potentially your own cell, your own bed, if you're 23 hours a day shut up there, it's pretty tough, So yeah, there are pros and cons, I think, to both sides.
So I'd imagine that you're seeing a lot of people, like, their mental health is deteriorating and their physical health is deteriorating. And how does your charity make efforts to address that?
So I suppose the first thing, I mean, Prisoners Abroad provide services according to needs. So we're working with around about 900 to 1,000 people at any one time, spread over 90 to 100 different countries. And as I'm sure you'll guess, like, prison conditions vary enormously from place to place, from country to country. And so we really try and tailor our services according to the needs of the individual where they are. In prisons in Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, usually the provision of food is, it's very difficult to maintain levels of health with the quantity and quality of the food that is provided, and water supplies as well being a big one. In a country like Thailand, our first concern is to make sure that the physical health can be supported. So because I think we recognize that the level of nutrition provided in prisons is not going to keep that person healthy or not going to maintain the levels of health. Therefore, they're going to need some extra money. With that extra money, you can buy hot meals, you can buy all kinds of things to support that. Then we'll be looking at medical care, because obviously a lot of people have ongoing medical needs. It could be through medication that they need to take, or consultations that they need to have. So we try and help people with those things as well. And we have a vitamin scheme where we can provide money to consular staff locally who will buy vitamins and take them into the prisons if that's allowed. But then there's obviously an entirely different level. The isolation that people feel in those situations can be quite extreme. If you don't speak the language, you may really struggle to understand what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Obviously, you're not following the conversations going on around you, so you're going to feel very lonely. Until fairly recently, communication with the outside world was very, very difficult.
Typically, how do people communicate with their family? Are they allowed to make phone calls? Are they allowed to use the internet, or is it all done by letters?
It was mostly done by letters, and still is. It varies from prison to prison. But one of the benefits of this, the whole coronavirus thing, was that because all physical visits stopped completely. I mean, the Thai prisons completely sealed them off from outside world. And so because no visits were possible, a lot of them started installing technology that could allow video calls and that kind of thing, which has been a real boost for a lot of our family members to actually be able to have a conversation and actually see their loved one on the other side. So that has improved. That's something that certainly got better. Before 2020, phone calls were very, very difficult. So really, it was letters. Really, that was the main way of keeping in touch.
Do you know, how does it like typically work in Thailand? Say if someone gets sentenced to, say, 10 years in a Thai prison, do they have to serve like a certain amount of time in a Thai prison, then they can relocate back to prison in the UK?
Yeah, so the prisoner transfer agreement that the UK has with Thailand is bilateral. So it's just between our two countries. And there are conditions attached to how long you would need to serve in Thailand before you're eligible to transfer. It has traditionally created lots of problems for British people, because when they compare themselves with their European counterparts, they see that the system seems to be much harsher for British citizens. And that's really a direct result of the agreement that we have with the Thai authorities. So the problem is that if somebody transfers back to the UK, although they'll be serving their time in a UK prison, we have to respect the sentence that was handed out by the Thai jurisdiction. So although UK release arrangements will apply to the part of the sentence that you serve in the UK, you've still got the Thai sentence to deal with. Now, Thai sentences have traditionally been very long, and they're getting a little bit shorter now because there's been some changes in the narcotics laws. But sentences are very, very long. So for trafficking quantities of a Class A drug, normally you would be given a death sentence, which would be automatically commuted into life in prison. Now, life in prison means exactly that, full life in prison. When you start getting amnesties, which periodically happen, so amnesties that are declared in Thailand have the effect of reducing the length of sentence, which should be a good thing. However, if you're on a life sentence in Thailand and you get it reduced, it might be reduced to 100 years or 80 years. So we've encountered lots of problems where people have transferred back to the UK, but then the remaining part of their sentence is still maybe 40 or 50 years. For an offence which, if they had been convicted in the UK, might only lead to a short sentence, 4 or 5 years. So it seems very unfair for those people that have to spend 40 years in a UK prison.
And is that what happens?
It sometimes happens, yes. Yeah.
And other countries, other European countries, have different agreements with Thailand that the sentences are a lot shorter.
Yes, I think it's something to do with the fact that in the UK we don't have an upper limit for drugs offences. So whereas in the Netherlands, for example, you might have got an 80-year sentence for drug trafficking in Thailand, you then transfer back to the Netherlands. Netherlands law says, well, the maximum that we could give somebody for this offence would be 15 years. So then that sentence now becomes 15 years, and then your release date is calculated accordingly. Whereas if you got an 80-year sentence in Thailand and transferred back to the UK, we do have it in our books that it would be possible to serve an 80-year sentence, to give an 80-year sentence. So that would be what you did. You don't get a chance to reduce it or alter it.
So it's all based on the agreement that basically the UK wants to honor the agreement with Thailand.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah.
I know you don't want to comment on specific people and cases, but can you share any success stories where your support significantly improved a prisoner's welfare?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so sometimes there are extreme examples, when someone needs an operation or something like that, and we can sometimes step in to provide that. But I'm thinking that there are lots of sort of much smaller kind of examples of big impact. So we have a medical fund, and that is designed to cover the costs of essential medication and treatment when that's not provided by the prison authorities. So it's quite a wide-ranging fund. We cover a lot of stuff with that. But one of the things that we cover quite often for people is reading glasses. Sounds like a little thing, but actually we really do regard that as essential. If you have eyesight problems, then glasses can be an absolute lifeline. I mean, bearing in mind that people will spend a lot of time in their cells or without a lot of mental stimulation, things to keep them going. In those situations, reading books is, incredibly important and can really be a lifeline. But if you can't see, if you can't read a book because you've lost your glasses or your glasses got broken, then that isn't available to you. So just helping people, providing that kind of thing can really make a big difference. Other sort of situations happen. People often have a mental health crisis when they are in these situations, and it's not uncommon for somebody to be in detention for example, immigration detention center in Bangkok. There's not either the sentence has been served for the offence they committed, or there may not have been a significant offence. It might have just been a short visa overstay or something like that. But people in that situation, if they are going through sort of mental health issues, they wouldn't be allowed on a plane. So that's a big problem. I mean, they may have the money in the account to cover the cost of the flight, but if mentally they're not well enough to actually do that, then they won't be going anywhere. So I think in those situations, we have provided support to allow somebody to access, psychiatric treatment, so that they can, receive some treatment for, a few days to a week, get them back on the right sort of mental frame, and to get them well enough to get on the plane. So sometimes that little bit of support can be the difference between being stuck in a cell for indefinitely or actually getting back to your family and friends. So.
Wow. Is that how it works? They've finished their sentence and they're waiting in immigration detention. They have the money for flights, etc. But because of their mental health condition, they can't leave. They're still imprisoned.
That's right, yeah. I
But
mean,
that
the
would
airline,
actually would not make their condition worse.
yes, but the airlines, they have very strict rules about this kind of things, because it represents a risk for them if they're taking somebody on board. So even sometimes we've had people who've booked flights, they're taken to the airport, and then it's discovered at the last moment that there's another person who's being deported on that flight. I believe that the captain of the plane in that situation is within their rights to say, we're only taking one. So that can involve somebody very disappointed being taken back to the IDC again. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's terrible. Imagine being so close to your freedom and then have to go back.
Yeah, that's very tough.
What role does the embassy play? Because I always wonder this. You know, I'm Irish, obviously. So if I was in trouble in Thailand or I got sent to prison or whatever, what role would the embassy play? And obviously different from Ireland and the UK. But what role does the British embassy play in people that are imprisoned in Thailand?
Okay, so I suppose to put it into context, Prisoners Abroad is, quite a small charity, but sort of 26, 27 people. We're based in Finsbury Park in London. We don't have any other offices anywhere else. We don't have any staff overseas on the ground. So really all the work that we do is from our office in London. So clearly, without help, we wouldn't be able to do the job that we do. So consular staff really form a bridge or a link between the person in detention and ourselves. Typically, if a British citizen is arrested in a foreign country, what typically happens is the foreign authorities will alert the local British embassy or consulate about the arrest of a British citizen. That would then trigger a visit to see that person, where they will explain to them what consular staff can do and what they can't do. And they'll be asking them whether there are any family or friends that they want to have informed of their arrest, which is very important because they cannot pass information on without permission. During that visit, which usually they'll do within 48 hours of being informed about the arrest, they would take in information from Prisoners Abroad. They'll take our registration forms in, and if everything goes smoothly, and it often does, especially in a country like Thailand, where we deal with a lot of arrests and we have very good relationships with the consular staff there, it works pretty smoothly. So typically they would go and visit the person, explain that Prisoners Abroad is there to support their welfare, ask them if they would like to register for our services. They probably sign the document then and there. And then consular staff will scan that into an email and send it to us, and we might receive that the same day. And we can then start sending grant payments, vitamin payments, sending out our information pack, letting them know what it is that we can do to help them and that kind of thing. So we simply couldn't do the things that we do without the consular staff. We also rely on them for regular updates. So in a country like Thailand, consular staff typically would visit prisoners on a sort of 3-monthly cycle. And that would be, it would be during those visits, will get updates from the prisoner, find out how their health and welfare is being affected and whether there are things that they need particular support with. So that information will then flow its way back to us and we can then act on it. And then in a similar way, if financial assistance is needed, if somebody has a medical problem and that medical problem is paying for and they don't have the funds to do that, Prisoners Abroad can step in and help with that. And we would send the funds through the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, so that through the network of embassies and consulates, that's how the money ends up reaching its destination.
Do you help people reintegrate into society after they finish their sentences and they come back to Britain?
Yes. So Prisoners Abroad starts providing support right from the point of arrest. And so, we provide services to people who are sentenced, who are on remand. So right the way through the course of their sentence, right up to the point of deportation. And in the lead up to their release date, we will be liaising with consular staff and trying to understand what their needs are going to be when they get back to the UK. Obviously, people have very varying situations when they come back. Some people are coming back to the family who can't wait to see them again, who are going to give them a roof over their head, food to eat and all of that stuff. For other people, it's a much more tricky situation. They may have burned their bridges with their families. They may be coming back to nothing, essentially. And some of these people have been out of the country for very long periods of time. So just even readjusting to British culture can be challenging. But even more so if you're basically arriving at the airport, having been deported, all you've got is the clothes that you're wearing and whatever money you have in your pocket and nowhere to go. yeah, so
So you provide hope then?
we do. So we work very closely with another social work charity called Travel Care, who are at Heathrow and Gatwick airports. So we will generally know when someone is being deported. We can arrange for them to go to Travel Care and pick up a sort of welcome pack, which can contain a mobile phone and travel card and some directions to the hostel. If they haven't got a place to stay, prisoners abroad make sure that they have a roof over their heads. We sort of focus a lot on that initial period because that's the sort of emergency period when people first come back, making sure that people got a roof over their heads, and we help them get into the benefit system, helping them get a national insurance number if they haven't got one already, making referrals to GPs, things like that. So that's kind of the emergency kind of first week or two. After that, we help people get into sort of longer term accommodation, and we're also providing sort of coaching, life skills, getting a CV together, understanding, the laws relating to revealing your criminal record if that's necessary to do. So yeah, we have a sort of a range of services that we provide to help people get back on their feet.
Any success stories of ex-prisoners who've come back to the UK and just rebuilt their lives and now are doing very well for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who manage to get into work and find themselves decent jobs. I think it's incredibly difficult if you are being deported from a country where you might have married somebody. So you might have a married partner in the other country, you might have children. And then suddenly you find yourself deported back to the UK where you may not have lived for many years. And although that's your nationality, it's not the nationality of your partner and children. And then you find yourself up against the laws relating to bringing your partner over, and how you're going to do that. You have to be earning a certain amount of money before the visas and will be granted and so on. But we know of people who do that, and that's totally rebuilding their lives from the bottom up. I mean, yeah, as we can't really talk about individual cases apart from the ones that are already out there in the public domain. But there's someone who you may well have heard of, Sean Atwood. He's got quite a big YouTube channel now.
Did
I
you work with
remember,
him?
yeah, and I remember
Wow.
when he was detained in the USA, he was absolutely voracious reader. He set himself the challenge of reading I don't know how many thousand books, and he read everything from the classics to all kinds of stuff. And he came out and wrote a book about his experiences, wrote another book, and so he's had several books written about his life, and then writing the stories of other people. So yeah, he's obviously incredibly successful.
What are your biggest challenges as a charity?
Well, I think financially, it's always been very challenging. I mean, there are many charities out there all asking for, public's attention and finances to support them. Some causes are, easier to raise money for than ourselves. I think for lots of people talking about issues relating to imprisonment, particularly imprisonment overseas, they think of that as something that will never happen to them. So why would I need to be concerned about this? People do think as well, if you committed the crime, so you do the time. Not much sympathy for you there. And whilst I can understand people thinking those things, what you really learn at prisoners abroad is that people make mistakes. Some people are wrongly imprisoned. Some people are framed for things they didn't do. But the fact that someone is serving a prison sentence shouldn't mean that their life is in danger or their mental health is jeopardized or that their dignity is removed. So we are providing services simply according to the needs of the individual. We are a non-judgmental charity, so we don't make decisions about the levels of support we offer according to what their situation is or what crime they've been convicted of or accused of. It's really just looking at that individual situation and trying to support them and their family and friends through it to the other side.
And if somebody wants to donate to your charity, how do they do it?
Well, we have a website, prisonersabroad.org.uk. It's a very easy to find the donation box on there. So I'd say that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll share that down below in the description box as well, so people can access the link that way. Matthew, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for doing it. It's eye-opening. You're doing some great work, and just thanks again for doing the interview.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having us.
No worries. Brilliant. Cheers.
Thank you.